You smooth the sheet 3 times, once for tradition, twice for appearance, the 3rd time because your hands won't stop shaking. The linen is white. It must be. Anything less would mean disgrace, not just for her, but for you and every servant in this wing. The sheet will be inspected by the matrons in the morning. It must show a mark, 1 spot, 1 stain, proof that virtue was handed over like a wrapped gift, unopened until tonight. The bed is already perfumed. You did that an hour ago. Crushed rose petals mixed with lavender oil and powdered clove. The scent has settled over the room like a veil, thick enough to hide what's coming. You light the candles along the wall, one by one. Their flames flicker, reflected in the polished brass of the wash basin. The basin must be spotless. Everything must be spotless. She sits at the edge of the chair, still, silent, staring straight ahead as if waiting for a blade to fall. Her hands rest in her lap. She has not spoken since the bells began to ring. That was 3 hours ago. Her mouth moved once. You think she whispered a prayer, or maybe just her own name, something small, something human. You didn't ask. It wouldn't matter. Her hair is done in the old style, braided in gold thread, pinned with a miniature cross made from her grandmother's rosary. The veil, thin as spider silk, clings to her shoulders. Her gown is ceremonial, ivory lace over raw silk, sleeves that fall to her wrists, hem-stitched by nuns who haven't spoken in years. No colour, no stains, no life. She's 15. They dressed her like a bride but spoke to her like a child. Walk slowly. Don't look down. Smile only when spoken to. Cry if it pleases him. Do not resist. Do not speak unless asked. Say your prayers. Cross yourself before you undress. If you bleed, show it. If you don't, pretend. There is cloth in the drawer. Use it if you must. You know this because you've heard it before. From other girls in other wings on other nights like this. You've held the cloth for them too. From outside, the hymns drift through the window, soft, sweet, dishonest. They sing of virtue, of holy union, of purity blessed by heaven. But heaven does not live in this room. Heaven has never seen what happens after the singing ends. The priest was here earlier. He placed a silver crucifix above the bed. He whispered a blessing in Latin while she stood in silence. His eyes didn't meet hers. His hands trembled when he passed the holy water to the chamberlain. The holy water touched her forehead. It did not make her clean. She was already clean. That was the point. He left the room before sunset. He didn't want to hear the door close tonight. You turn back to her now. She hasn't moved. Her eyes are still fixed on something you can't see. Her lips are pale, her veil is slipping. Do you want water? You ask. She doesn't answer. Her throat moves once, that's all. You kneel to fix the hem of her gown. It's dragging, and the queen will notice. You tuck the lace under, careful not to prick her with the pin. She doesn't flinch. The skin on her ankle is smooth and cold. You wonder if she feels anything at all. The sound of footsteps echoes in the hallway. Heavy, slow. Not hers. His. You both hear it. She straightens just slightly. You rise to your feet and adjust the veil. It's crooked again. Your hands brush her cheek as you smooth it. Her skin is damp. The scent of lavender rises with her breath. You want to say something. You don't. The door opens, but he doesn't enter yet. He always waits a moment. Maybe for effect. Maybe to remind her that this is not her room anymore. You step back, lower your head, and move toward the wall. You won't be dismissed until he sees her. That's part of the ritual, part of the proof. You watch the princess from the corner of your eye. Her back straightens. Her shoulders lift. She becomes something else, not a girl, not even a woman, just an offering, dressed in white, prepared, presented. You think of the stories, the noble houses that fail to produce heirs. The girls blame them for their barrenness, for their sins, for their refusal to accept what was expected of them. You remember one princess who tried to run. She didn't make it past the courtyard. You never saw her again. The prince steps inside. His boots are polished. His hands are gloved. He does not look at you. He doesn't have to. You bow and exit the room. The door shuts behind you with a hollow sound. You wait outside, as instructed, listening for a sound you never want to hear. Later you will wash the basin. You will fold the stained linen. You will nod when the matrons inspect it. You will say nothing. You will feel nothing. She will be praised. The court will whisper about her grace, her dignity, her divine purity. They will speak of the white veil and the crimson spot as though it were a miracle. They will write it down, sing songs about it, paint it into a fresco where she will kneel forever in gratitude for a night she wasn't allowed to forget. But you know what she whispered? Not a prayer, not her name. She said, "I don't want to go." They called it virtue. But it was ownership, locked behind hymns, oaths, and velvet curtains. A princess's virginity was not her own. It belonged to her father, her court, her kingdom. She carried it the way a soldier carries a flag, on display, held high, expected never to fall. But unlike a flag, it could not be touched, torn, or tested without consequence. And still, it was tested, over and over, in whispered questions, in quiet rooms, in letters written across continents by men who would never meet her face, but would inspect her body from behind titles and seals. Virginity wasn't about morality, it was about control. When the Habsburg Empire needed peace with Spain, they sent a girl. She was 12. Her name was Maria Theresa, and her body was inspected by midwives before she crossed the Pyrenees. Not because she was ill, but because Spain demanded assurance. No blemish, no defect, no previous use. The treaty depended on it. The fate of thousands was measured against the tightness of her skin and the silence of her shame. Bourbon France followed the same pattern. When Marie Antoinette was sent to marry the future Louis XVI, she travelled with a certificate. It had been signed by court physicians and witnessed by 3 matrons. The certificate didn't declare her intelligence, her faith, or her readiness to rule. It confirmed only one thing, that she was intact. The Tudors were worse. In Henry VIII's court, the virginity of noble women was not just prized, it was recorded. Elizabeth I was praised as the Virgin Queen, though her personal letters revealed deep tension around that title. She understood the power it gave her and the prison it built around her. She once wrote, "I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Yet every ambassador who sought her hand demanded confirmation of her chastity, as though the future of England hinged on whether a man had ever touched her. In royal courts, virginity became a currency. You could trade it for alliances, you could leverage it for influence, but you could not keep it for yourself. And if you lost it before the right hand claimed it, you were ruined. Some princesses were never meant to marry. Their purity was too politically valuable to risk. They were locked into convents, not for spiritual calling, but to keep them unspoiled. Not even God was allowed near them without royal permission. They became brides of Christ because their fathers couldn't afford to make them brides of men. In 1604, Princess Isabella Clara Eugenia of Spain was one such offering. She was devoted to the church, but her true function was political. Her virginity protected her claim to certain lands in the Low Countries. If she married, the territories might pass to another house, so she was encouraged to remain celibate. Her purity wasn't about God, it was about borders. The process was ritualized. When a princess reached puberty, her body became a matter of state. Midwives inspected her monthly. Her linens were checked for signs of her cycle. If she showed signs of illness, she was questioned, gently but persistently. Has she been touched? Had she touched herself? Dreams were analysed for hints of sinful thought. Confessors recorded these secrets in coded language for their patrons at court. And then came the public displays. Some courts required young noblewomen to undergo virginity inspections before marriage. The French court called it la preuve, the proof. It was a humiliating tradition that involved female examiners, but always under the eyes of men. Physicians would insert fingers, then nod or shake their heads. It wasn't science, it was a theatre, a ritualized humiliation dressed in the language of medicine, to reassure kings and bishops that their chosen bride was a sealed vessel. In 1543, at the marriage of Catherine Howard to Henry VIII, rumours began to spread that she had been previously deflowered. Her political enemies seized on the gossip like blood in water. A secret council convened. Witnesses were called. Her former attendants were interrogated. Catherine was forced to describe in detail her intimate history. Whether she had consented or not didn't matter. The only relevant fact was whether she had ever been touched. She was beheaded the following year, not for adultery, but for failing to be what the court had claimed she was. Even when virginity was intact, it brought no safety, only expectation. A girl praised for her purity had to remain silent, obedient, perfect. She was not allowed to show fear, not allowed to ask questions, not allowed to say no, because a virgin who said no was dangerous. She had power, the power to delay, to withhold, to embarrass. That wasn't tolerated. In 1711, Princess Wilhelmina of Prussia refused to marry the man her father chose. She had not been touched. She was praised for her piety, her modesty, her gentle ways. But when she resisted, all of that changed. Her father ordered that she be confined to her chambers. She was forbidden to speak to her mother. Her letters were intercepted. Her tutors were dismissed. The same traits that once made her an icon of courtly virtue now marked her as disobedient, unstable, unfit. Purity meant silence, obedience, stillness. You could be praised in song, praised in portrait, praised in scripture, but the moment you claimed ownership of your own body, the praise turned to suspicion, to discipline, to shame. Because a pure girl was an empty space, waiting to be filled by someone else's purpose, a mirror that only reflected what others wanted to see. She was never allowed to speak first, never allowed to say, "I am whole." She was only allowed to wait, and the longer she waited, the more her purity turned to poison. Something others wanted to touch but not understand. Something they admired only so long as they could control it. So they kept her behind locked doors, where hymns drowned her voice, and lace hid the bruise, and silence became her crown. They told her she was chosen, not for marriage, not for love, but for God. A higher calling, they said, a holy path, a spiritual destiny written in her blood. She was born into the House of Austria, and that meant she did not belong to herself. Maria Anna was 13 when the decision was made. She would not marry, she would not bear children, she would never leave, she would become a bride of Christ. Her brother, Charles II of Spain, was already withering under the weight of inbreeding and superstition. His body was fragile, his mind twisted by years of isolation and manipulation. Maria Anna, younger by 7 years, was strong in body but no freer in mind. Her fate was sealed before she had a chance to understand it. The court whispered that she was too delicate, too holy, too sacred to be touched by men. In truth, she was too valuable to risk losing. Her virginity had to be preserved, not for her own sake, but to protect the fragile dignity of a crumbling royal house. They sent her to Las Descalzas Reales, the royal convent in Madrid, a place of silence, of veils, of velvet-lined restraint. The convent was not a prison, not on the outside. The rooms were richly furnished, the chapel glittered with gold leaf, the windows were tall and arched, letting sunlight in like judgment. But the air inside was not warm. It was still, measured, hollow. Maria Anna did not choose this life. She was led into it by her mother, her confessors, and the expectations of a court obsessed with appearances. Her dowry was not gold, but flesh. She gave her youth to God because no one asked if she wanted to keep it. Her journals begin at age 14. The handwriting is careful, the ink is thin. On the first page she writes, "I am told I am blessed. I must learn to feel this. That line appears again and again in different forms throughout her pages. I must learn to feel this. I must learn to be joyful. I must learn to love the silence. But the silence did not love her. Her daily routine was carved out in hours, lauds at dawn, followed by 2 hours of silent prayer, then study, then confession, then mass, then more silence. Meals were taken without speaking. Her only voice was in the journal, and even that had to be kept secret. If her confessor had found it, he would have burned it. Thoughts belong to God, not to girls. By age 16, the entries changed. I dreamed of light, but woke in the shadows. I do not feel holy. I feel hollow. I must not speak of these things. I am told they are temptations. Temptation for Maria Anna was not lust. It was longing. Longing for laughter, for voices, for her own name spoken without pity. She wrote of dreams where she wore red, where she danced, where she ran through gardens without a veil. She woke from these dreams in tears, then begged forgiveness at the altar. Her confessors grew concerned. They increased her penance. They told her the devil liked to enter through dreams, that her body was trying to betray her. She must not let it. So she began fasting, restricting food, kneeling on stone for hours until her knees bruised. She wore hair shirts beneath her gown, pricking her skin with every movement. She asked for permission to sleep on the floor. Sometimes it was granted, sometimes not. But she did it anyway. She wanted to be clean, holy, worthy of the title they had forced upon her. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't silence the voice inside that asked, "What did I do wrong to end up here?" Her purity became a sickness, not because she had sinned, but because she believed she hadn't done enough to deserve it. Visitors came to the convent sometimes, nobles, foreign dignitaries. They looked at Maria Anna through the grate of the choir stall. They praised her piety, her beauty, her perfect obedience. Some left donations, others left poems. She was a symbol now, a holy woman, a political relic, proof that the royal bloodline was still blessed by God, even as it rotted from within. She hated those visits. After one, she wrote, "They see a saint. I see a child who was not allowed to grow, her body aged, her spirit withered." But the rituals continued. Every month she confessed her thoughts, every thought, her dreams, her hunger, her doubts, her hatred of the bell that called her to morning prayer, her secret envy of the kitchen girls who were allowed to laugh when they thought no one heard. The confessors recorded it all, not in her name, but in codes, in symbols, in silence. One wrote, "The Lady Maria wrestles with spiritual dryness. She clings to worldly images. Further mortification may be necessary." Further mortification meant more fasting, longer prayers, fewer comforts. The room grew colder, the meals are smaller, the silence is deeper. At 21, her writing changed again. "My prayers are quieter now. I ask for less. I do not seek joy. I only ask to endure. I would like to remember what my voice sounded like before it began to echo." By now she'd stopped resisting. She did what was asked. She bowed when spoken to. She crossed herself before every word. Her journals became mechanical, the entries shorter, more distant. Then, at 24, they stopped entirely. She lived another 2 decades inside the convent. Her body remained untouched. Her title remained intact. She was praised in court sermons, honoured in family portraits. Her purity, they said, was proof of divine favour upon Spain. But no one asked if she ever felt holy. No one asked if she was proud of her life. No one asked what she dreamed about when the hymns faded and the candles burned low. Her virtue became a monument, and she was buried beneath it. They called her La Loca, the Mad One. But madness was only the name they gave her resistance, Juana of Castile was never meant to rule. That was her brother's path, then her sister's, then her brother's son. Juana was meant to be pure, obedient, and politically useful. The third daughter of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, she was raised for marriage, not power. Her value was in her blood and her body, untainted, Catholic, and fertile. At 16, she was betrothed to Philip the Handsome, Duke of Burgundy. The match was strategic. Spain wanted stronger ties to the Holy Roman Empire. Juana was the key. She crossed the sea in silence, cloaked in prayers and painted with the promise of obedience. But love interfered. Unlike most royal marriages, Juana fell for Philip with a fire she couldn't hide. The court saw it as a flaw. She wanted him. Not just as a political ally or a father to her children. She wanted him in ways women weren't supposed to. Her letters were filled with longing, sometimes desperation. Her need for his presence, his touch, his attention, broke the image of detached, graceful virginity that had been crafted for her. At first, the courtiers laughed. Then they worried. Because Juana's purity was supposed to be symbolic, controlled, silent, dignified. Instead, she wept when Philip left court. She followed him to his hunts. She barged into his council meetings. When he spent nights with other women, as powerful men often did, she screamed. She was accused. She confronted him in public. Her love was not polite. It was unmanageable. So they began to say she was unwell, not because she had sinned, but because she felt. By 23, Juana had borne several children. She was praised for her fertility, but the praise came with a curse. Each pregnancy isolated her further. Philip travelled. Juana remained behind, confined to chambers, surrounded by handlers who monitored her every word. Her jealous outbursts became court gossip. Her prayers became longer. Her fasting is more extreme. She was mourning a man who was still alive, mourning a marriage that had become a stage performance. Him smiling, her silenced. They said she was too emotional, too unstable, too obsessed, but they still dressed her in white. The image had to remain intact. The Virgin of Spain, the mother of future emperors, the holy figure who walked the halls like a ghost, praying and crying in equal measure. After Philip's sudden death in 1506, likely from typhoid, Juana broke completely. She refused to bury him. She had the coffin sealed, guarded, and carried beside her as she travelled across Spain. Not for a day, not for a week, for months. She said he was not truly gone, that the priests were wrong, that the light of God had not yet left him. Her grief was too public, too wild, too inconvenient, so they locked her away, first under the care of her father Ferdinand, then later her own son Charles V. They used her mourning as proof of her madness. She prayed too often. She spoke to the coffin. She lit candles in patterns no one understood. They said she was dangerous. But she never attacked anyone. She never rebelled. She just refused to disappear. Her confinement began at Tordesillas, a fortress made into a convent. Her rooms were cold and bare. Her ladies were replaced by nuns. The windows were shuttered. Letters from her children were intercepted. For 46 years, Juana was kept under supervision. Her food was monitored. Her prayers were timed. Her expressions are documented. If she smiled too long, they reported it. If she didn't eat enough, they noted that too. The girl who had once been loved for her dignity was now feared for her unpredictability. But the image had to remain, so they painted her as a saintly sufferer, a holy woman, a tragic queen. Her virgin-like persona remained, untouched by political corruption, cloaked in forced spirituality. But behind that image was a woman trapped in layers of control. She was allowed to attend Mass, but only with guards. She could speak, but only when spoken to. She could write, but only under supervision. And yet, she endured. She continued to pray. to sing, to remember. When Charles V came to visit her, he wept, not from guilt, from fear. He saw what happened to someone who stepped outside the lines of royal obedience. Juana was a mirror held too close. Her tragedy lies in what they took and what they left. They didn't kill her. They erased her in slow motion. Her purity remained intact, but her joy vanished. Her voice became a threat. So they gave her a new one. Madness! It explained everything. It excused everything. The passion, madness, the jealousy, madness, the grief, madness. She was not insane. She was abandoned, punished for feeling what a holy figure was never allowed to feel, because purity, once politicized, becomes a weapon, and Juana stood at the centre of the blade. She arrived in England with prayers stitched into her hem, quiet, slender, 17. A German princess trained not to speak out of turn. Her name was Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, and by the time she set foot in London, she had already been measured, not in inches, but in expectations. She was unspoiled. That was the word they used. Unspoiled, modest, pious. The perfect match for a king obsessed with order. George III had never met her. The marriage was arranged in letters. But what mattered most to his court wasn't her conversation or her lineage. It was the fact that she came untouched, virginal, a blank slate upon which England could write its next royal chapter. They married within 6 hours of her arrival. The chapel was full. The gown was pale. The Archbishop's blessing lingered longer than the kiss. And then the doors closed. The music faded. The couple was left alone. We don't know what happened on that wedding night. Not exactly. But court records mention that the king resumed political meetings the next morning without delay. The Queen, meanwhile, remained in her rooms for 2 days, her ladies instructed not to speak unless spoken to. What followed was not scandal, it was silence. For years, Charlotte played her role without complaint. She bore children, 15 in total, but the details of her marriage remained hidden behind thick drapes and ceremonial duties. She was praised for her virtue, her calm, her religious devotion. Poets compared her to the Virgin Mary. Ministers called her the moral spine of the monarchy. But inside she was unravelling. Her personal letters, few but honest, reveal a woman isolated in gold. She wrote not to friends but to confessors, not about love but about guilt. I do my duty, but I do not feel joy. I hope this is not a sin. I fear I am only pleasing in my silence. When I speak, he turns away. I am told I am blessed. I must learn to agree. The king was not cruel, but he was distant. George III's mind was often elsewhere, on war, on parliament, on the stirrings of revolution, and eventually on his own deteriorating health. When his madness began to take hold, Charlotte became not a wife, but a witness. His ravings, his episodes, his disappearances into incoherence, they all passed through her and left her empty. Still, she remained virtuous. That word became her cage. When the king began to lose control of his speech and actions, Charlotte did not leave him. She stayed. She prayed. She smiled through dinners where he shouted at invisible enemies. She slept alone while he wandered the palace halls. She had fulfilled every requirement of a royal bride. She was fertile, loyal, obedient. But as the years passed, her virtue became a subject of court gossip, not admiration but suspicion. Why does she never speak in public? Why does she wear such plain gowns? Why does she look so pale when she stands beside him? Some whispered that she had lost his affection. Others said she never had it to begin with. The rumours turned cruel. Her silence was reframed as dullness, her modesty as weakness, her faith as fanaticism. It didn't matter that she had raised a dynasty, that she had kept the monarchy from collapse. What mattered was that she'd stopped smiling, and so they began calling her cold. It's there in the correspondence of noblemen. The Queen is distant. The Queen is stiff. The Queen is untouched. It was meant as a joke, but she read it, and she believed it. In one letter she wrote, "I am told I am cold. If this is true, it is because I was never warmed. There is no record of her being unfaithful, no scandal in her name, no poetry written in her honour, only duty, only expectation, and guilt." Her confessor, Father Joseph Rowe, noted that she spoke often of sin, but never named one. She feared that God was displeased with her lack of feeling, that perhaps her soul had gone quiet, that maybe she had failed as a woman, because even in purity she felt shame. She was praised for chastity, but pitied in whispers, a queen with no passion, a wife with no laughter. They compared her to the Virgin, but they didn't want her to act like one. Her role was impossible. Be pure, but not cold. Be silent, but not lifeless. Be obedient, but inspire. Be unblemished, but unforgettable. She failed only by being real. When George III was finally declared unfit to rule, Charlotte took on new duties, organising the household, shielding the king from humiliation, managing the growing strain between their sons. Her health declined. Her hair thinned. Her letters grew shorter. She became a figurehead behind a figurehead. Her power was symbolic, like her virtue, decorative, revered, dismissed. In her final years she rarely appeared in public. When she did, she wore black. Her veil covered more than mourning. It hid her face from those who had turned her into a symbol she could no longer carry. And yet, they still praised her, still wrote hymns in her name, still held her up as the standard for royal womanhood, unscandalous, unfailing, untouched, but never asked if she had been loved. Charlotte died quietly in 1818. Her funeral was solemn. Her portrait hung beside George's, though they had not shared a room in years. History remembers her as devoted, religious, respectable, but not happy, not free, not whole. Her purity made her a queen, and kept her from ever being a woman. They said it was a matter of protocol, a formality, nothing more. But Princess Isabella understood. She was not being prepared for marriage. She was being evaluated like livestock. She was 16. The treaty had been signed. The dowry was arranged. The portraits were exchanged. The groom, a Habsburg cousin she'd never met, was waiting in Vienna. Before she could be shipped across the Alps, her purity had to be verified, not by oath, not by character, but by flesh. The morning of the inspection she was bathed in rosewater, her hair braided in silence. The nuns who raised her said nothing, only crossed themselves when they tied the last ribbon. Her gown was not white, but pale blue, a colour of submission. Her shoes were removed before she entered the chamber. 3 physicians were waiting, 2 from the Austrian court, 1 local, all men, their wigs powdered, their gloves spotless. They bowed as she entered, but didn't smile. One carried a ledger, another held a pair of steel calipers. She was told to stand, then to disrobe. No women were present. There was no priest, no chaperone, no family. The lead physician explained in broken Italian that the exam would be brief. It was for the health of the empire, he said, for the peace between crowns, for the future of Europe. She didn't reply, she couldn't. Her gown was removed, her shift, her underlinen layer by layer until she stood before them like a statue, bare and silent. Her skin burned with shame, though the chamber was cold. Her breath trembled, but her legs held. She had been trained for this, not the inspection itself, but the stillness, the silence, the ability to endure without breaking. They began with measurements, height, hips, pelvis width. They examined her spine, her teeth, her feet. They recorded everything, her heart rate, her pulse, the placement of her moles. Then they asked her to lie down. She obeyed. The third man, silent until now, lifted her knees apart. She stared at the ceiling while the others observed. No curtain, no modesty, just cold fingers and soft murmurs in a language she didn't know. The physician nodded. The others wrote, "Intact." That was the word they used. Intact. The inspection lasted 13 minutes. When it ended, they helped her dress. The lead physician gave a polite bow and handed her a folded letter. It was addressed to the Emperor's council, sealed with red wax. She wasn't supposed to read it. She did anyway. It said, "The princess is unspoiled, fit for conjugal duties, physically sound, no sign of disease or defect, hymenal membrane present, further confirmation upon arrival." She burned the letter that night, but she remembered every word. The following week she was escorted to the port of Genoa. The ship had been prepared, a special cabin, a nursemaid, a priest who blessed the sheets she would sleep on. None of them looked her in the eye. She sailed for 8 days, prayed on 4, slept little, ate less. In Vienna a new gown waited, new customs, new languages. But the expectations remained the same. Her husband, Leopold, met her at the palace gate. He was tall, red-cheeked, polite. He smiled as he took her hand. He told her she looked healthy. She nodded. She did not speak. The wedding was held within 48 hours. The bed was examined the next morning. A stain was found. She had used cloth from her sleeve. Her maid helped her. They knew what was expected, knew what was required to satisfy the court. The matrons were pleased. The chamberlain gave a written report. Consummation successful. Another lie. The truth was silence. Leopold was kind but distant, formal. He treated her with respect, but not warmth, not touch. Months passed. No child. Doctors were summoned. Tonic was prescribed. Prayers said. Diets adjusted. Still no child. By the 2nd year the whispers began. They said she was frigid, aloof, cold. Her silence, once seen as grace, became cause for suspicion. Midwives suggested she might not be fully developed. Confessors hinted at hidden sin. The blame circled around her like smoke. No one spoke of the inspection, of the hands, the metal, the feeling of being watched like an animal in a market. No one asked how that moment stayed with her, how it returned in her sleep, how her body flinched even when no one touched her. She prayed harder, fast, longer. She read the saints' biographies, searching for some path through her shame. She confessed that she didn't feel anything during her marriage. Not desire, not dread, nothing. Her confessor said she must try harder. She tried. In her 4th year of marriage she conceived. 7 weeks later she miscarried. The court blamed her constitution. The emperor blamed her prayers. Leopold said nothing. She miscarried again and again. By her 30th birthday she had lost 5 pregnancies. At 31 she was declared barren. She was moved to a smaller palace on the outskirts of Vienna, a quiet place with gardens and white furniture. She was told it was for her health. It was exile. Her title remained. Her portrait still hung in the royal gallery. But her voice faded from court. She became a symbol again, of failed fertility, of too much purity, of the dangers of coldness in women. She wrote once to her maid, now living in Naples. "I did what they asked. I showed them everything. I let them take it all, and still I was not enough." No one replied. She died at 42. No official cause was given, only weakness of the lungs. But those who knew her said she had simply stopped trying to breathe. Her inspection was not a single moment. It was the beginning of a life spent proving something that had already been taken. She was praised for her chastity. But it was that praise that broke her. At Versailles, silence was a skill, one you had to master quickly, before the gowns were fitted, before the ink dried on the marriage contract, before your name vanished beneath your title. The court under Louis XV and Louis XVI was a performance. Every face powdered, every movement choreographed, every girl placed where she could be seen, but not heard. Purity was expected, not as a moral virtue, but as a fashion, a garment, an accessory to power. The veil told the story. When a young noblewoman entered Versailles as a bride-in-waiting, the veil came first. Pale, sheer, light enough to see her eyes, but heavy enough to blur expression. It was not meant to shield her. It was meant to announce her. Untouched, compliant, ready. The veil was pinned by other women, mothers, aunts, governesses, their hands practiced, their faces blank. The girl stood still while it was secured. Not a question, not a word. She might smile politely, but only with her mouth, never the eyes, because everyone knew what happened to the girls who smiled too much. They were called bold, forward, dangerous. At court, chastity was demanded, but not respected. Louis XV kept a rotating cast of mistresses in the Petit Trianon, while his ministers paraded virgin brides through state corridors. The contradiction didn't trouble them. They wanted their queens pure and their beds full, and the girls knew it. They arrived by carriage, 12, sometimes 13 years old, daughters of dukes, barons, foreign lords, all sworn to serve France with their obedience. Their contracts were inked in bloodlines, not feelings. Their worth measured in hymens and airs. They were shown their rooms first, then their mirrors, then their lessons, how to walk, how to bow, how to cry without smudging powder. The veil never came off in public. In private, it was different. One girl, unnamed in the records, wrote home, "They say I am beautiful when I do not speak. The king's valet nodded at me yesterday. I do not know if it was approval or instruction. My maid says to keep my veil on at all times, even when I sleep if I can manage it. They say it will make me more valuable. More valuable, like a jewel, or a vase, not more loved, not more human." In another letter, a girl named Aimée wrote to her sister, "The Queen smiled at me. It was not warm, it was like candlelight in the rain. I am to be presented at Sunday Mass. They've stitched lilies into my bodice. The seamstress said lilies mean innocence, but they smell like rot. That was how it worked. You were praised for being still, for blinking softly, for not asking what would happen on your wedding night. The moment you asked questions, the court recoiled. Curiosity in a woman was dangerous. It meant a mind was still present. One girl, known only as Lisette, arrived from Normandy. 14, pretty, obedient, curious, too curious. She asked her tutor why the Queen's chambermaids wept when no one watched. She asked why the King's confessor avoided eye contact with the Dauphine. She asked why the stained sheets from wedding nights were taken away by servants with hollow eyes. Her questions were quiet, private, but Versailles had ears everywhere. She was sent back to her father's estate before her 16th birthday. No explanation. Just a sealed letter from the Royal Council. Her veil was removed without ceremony. She never married. The veil had become her badge, her proof, and when they took it away, they took everything else too. The girls who stayed learned quickly. Silence brought rewards, praise, pearls, maybe even proximity to the Queen. But it also brought something else, invisibility. Because once the veil became part of your skin, no one wanted to see beneath it. You were expected to marry, bleed once, conceive twice, smile always, and never speak of what you lost in the process. Letters from the time reveal the growing confusion these girls felt. "I have done everything right," one wrote. "I have remained still. I have eaten little. I have slept alone. But I feel no lightness, only dust." Another girl wrote, "They say my silence is beautiful, but I do not feel beautiful. I feel erased." At Versailles, purity was not dignity. It was a decoration, a tool, a mask, a myth. And the veil, the object meant to protect, became the symbol of submission. They draped it over girls like a blessing. But behind it, no one listened when the girls began to break. They always said the wedding night was a celebration, a sacred act, the closing of one chapter and the start of another. But for the girls behind the locked doors, it was something else. It was a ritual of fear. The candles burned low, the gowns were folded, the prayers had been said. Now came the moment everyone waited for, the one that would not be painted or sung about or written in the records, but whose outcome would define everything that followed. For some, it began with silence, for others, with begging. But always, it ended with a sheet, white, then red, then folded, sealed, and sent. The blood was proof, the pain was proof, the fear was proof. If a stain was not found, there were consequences. One girl, barely 14, was presented to a duke in Portugal. She had been told what to expect in vague terms: a duty, a uniting of bodies, a divine joining. She knelt in her chapel for hours before the procession. When the chamber door closed, she looked at her husband and whispered, "Please be gentle." He did not respond. The next morning the sheet was clean. By noon the interrogations began. Was she a fraud? Had she betrayed her vows? The midwives examined her again, rougher this time, deeper. They said she was intact, that perhaps the husband had not done his part. The duke was humiliated. The girl was punished anyway. She was forced to fast for a week, confess her thoughts daily, sleep on the floor. They said it was penance for casting doubt on the dignity of the marriage. Another girl in Bavaria was sent with a knife hidden in her corset, not to defend herself, but to create a wound if needed, just enough to mark the sheet. Her aunt had explained it to her before she left. Better a drop of your own blood than a flood of shame. She did as instructed. No one asked where the stain came from. They were too relieved to look closer, but the worst were the ones who complied fully, who endured the pain, who stained the linen, who smiled the next day. Because those were the ones who broke slowly, over years. Their prayers became apologies, their bodies became property, their wombs became tools, and every child they bore was a reminder of how they got there. They whispered to saints no one else remembered. Saint Dymphna for madness, Saint Philomena for purity, Saint Margaret for safe childbirth. They lit candles in corners where the priest didn't see, asked questions they were never allowed to say aloud. What if I feel nothing? What if he hurts me? What if I die? Because some did. One letter, recovered from the Spanish court, described a bride who bled too much on her first night. Her Highness did not rise the next morning. The bed was soaked. The chambermaids wept but were told not to speak. A mass was held in silence. No one wrote her name. Another girl disappeared before the wedding could even begin. She had locked herself in her room, refused to come out. For hours her nurse pleaded through the door. Her mother sobbed, her husband to be threatened. She said nothing. The door was forced open by guards. The room was empty. No broken glass, no rope, no blood, just an open window and a veil on the floor. They searched the grounds for 2 days. They dragged the river. They questioned every servant. Nothing. Her name was struck from the records, her portraits removed, her dowry returned. Officially, she had never existed, but one chambermaid remembered her. She asked me what it felt like, the maid said. I told her the truth. She cried all night. For centuries, courts built entire systems around this one moment, this single, sealed act between strangers. It was never about love, never about unity. It was about power, ownership, the transformation of a girl into a vessel. The room was made beautiful, the bed draped in lace, the candles scented. But behind the polish was terror. Some girls flinched at every movement. Others prayed to faint. A few asked their nurses if death was possible, and how likely. They walked in white. They came out hollow, because the blood wasn't just on the sheet. It was in the silence that followed, in the eyes that looked away, in the hymns sung too brightly the next morning. They called it virtue, but it was a transaction, and in the end it was the girl who paid.